Before we begin, if you're interested in uncovering the hidden stories of the early church, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Early Church Unveiled for more historical insights. In the swirling chaos of the Roman Empire, a new faith emerged, quietly but powerfully reshaping the values of an entire civilization. This faith radiated a profound respect for life, especially for those who were most vulnerable and overlooked by society. Early Christians held a radical belief: every human life from the moment of conception was sacred and a precious gift from God, worthy of protection and reverence. This conviction stood in stark contrast to the prevailing norms of Roman society, where abortion and infanticide were tragically commonplace, and the weak were often discarded. For these early followers of Jesus, each life bore the imprint of the divine, a reflection of the Creator in every womb, regardless of circumstance. This belief fueled their compassionate response to the marginalized and forgotten, offering a beacon of hope in a world often shrouded in darkness and despair. The early Christians saw in Jesus a model of love and care for all people, especially those whom society cast aside. They believed that every person, regardless of age, status, or condition, possessed inherent dignity and worth, simply by virtue of being human. This conviction fueled their unwavering opposition to abortion, setting them apart from the broader culture. They recognized the unborn child not as a potential life but as a life with potential, deserving of protection, love, and the opportunity to flourish within the community. Theirs was a message of radical empathy, a call to recognize the humanity of the most vulnerable, and to extend the hand of love to those deemed disposable by the society around them. This deep respect for life from its earliest moments flowed from the Christians' understanding of God's creative power, and their belief that every soul was intentionally crafted. Just as God breathed life into the first humans, so too did they believe He continued to weave His image into each child forming in the womb, making every life sacred. This belief shaped their understanding of personhood, extending it far beyond the arbitrary lines drawn by the culture of their time and challenging the very definitions of value and humanity. In their eyes, to harm an unborn child was to assault the very image of God, a transgression against the sacredness of life itself, and a wound to the heart of their faith. Their commitment to the sanctity of life served as a powerful counter-narrative to the prevailing indifference towards the unborn and the marginalized, inspiring others to reconsider their own values. In a world where power often dictated worth, the early Christians dared to proclaim the inherent value of every human being, regardless of their social standing or physical condition. By challenging the very foundations of Roman society, they offered a glimpse of a world transformed by love, compassion, and an unwavering commitment to the dignity of every life, a legacy that continues to inspire to this day. The early Christians found compelling reasons for their unwavering stance on the sanctity of life within the very words of their sacred texts. For them, the scriptures were not just historical documents or sources of moral guidance, but living testimonies that spoke directly to the value and dignity of every human being, even before birth. The Bible, particularly the Hebrew scriptures, spoke with resounding clarity about the value of life in the womb, affirming their belief that God's care extended to each life from its earliest beginnings. These ancient words offered a vision of humanity that began not at birth, but at conception, with God's loving attention present from the very start. In the book of Psalms, chapter 139 verses 13-16, King David, reflecting on his own existence, penned these powerful words: "You formed my inmost being, you knit me in my mother's womb." This poetic imagery captured the intimate involvement of the Creator in the mystery of human life. "I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made." These words, echoing through the centuries, reminded believers that every person is crafted with intention and care, a masterpiece of divine artistry. These verses resonated deeply with the early Christians, reinforcing their conviction that God was intimately involved in the formation of each person, carefully crafting them within the womb. The idea that life was sacred from its very inception became a cornerstone of their faith and practice. The prophet Jeremiah, in Jeremiah chapter 1 verse 5, called by God before his birth, provided another powerful testament to the sanctity of life in the womb. His story was a vivid reminder that God's plans and purposes for each individual begin long before they are born. "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I dedicated you. A prophet to the nations I appointed you." This declaration was not just for Jeremiah, but for all who would read these words, affirming the divine knowledge and purpose present in every life. These words echoed through the centuries, reaching the ears of the early Christians and solidifying their belief that God's plan for each person unfolded long before they took their first breath. The sense of destiny and calling, present even in the womb, shaped their understanding of human worth. The womb, far from being a place of isolation, was a sacred space where God's purpose and love for each individual were already at work. Early Christians saw pregnancy as a time when the Creator's hands were actively shaping a new life, deserving of reverence and protection. These scriptural passages, among others, served as foundational pillars in the early Christians' understanding of abortion. They looked to these texts for guidance, finding in them a clear mandate to honor and defend life at every stage. They believed that to end a pregnancy was to interfere with God's divine plan, to extinguish a life known and cherished by the Creator before it had the chance to fully blossom. This belief was not rooted in fear, but in a deep sense of responsibility to uphold the sacredness of life. Their commitment to the sanctity of life stemmed not from a place of judgment or condemnation, but from a profound reverence for the Creator and His awe-inspiring work in forming each human life. This reverence inspired compassion and a desire to protect the vulnerable. The early Christians found in the Bible an unshakable foundation for their stance on abortion. Their faith was anchored in the conviction that every life, no matter how small or hidden, was precious in the eyes of God. These sacred texts provided compelling evidence that life in the womb held immense value in the eyes of God. The scriptures became a source of hope and guidance, shaping the community's response to the moral questions of their time. The words of the prophets and psalmists resonated with their own experiences of faith, confirming their belief that each life was a unique and precious creation, deserving of protection, love, and the opportunity to fulfill the purpose for which it was created. This conviction shaped not only their beliefs, but also their actions within their communities. Their unwavering stance on abortion, rooted in the very words of Scripture, served as a beacon of hope in a world often indifferent to the plight of the unborn. Through their faith and their reverence for the sacred texts, the early Christians offered a vision of life that was both compassionate and courageous, inviting others to see the profound worth of every human being from the very beginning. Throughout the early centuries of Christianity, the voices of the Church Fathers rang out with clarity and conviction, condemning abortion as a grave moral wrong. These influential leaders, teachers, theologians, and defenders of the faith spoke out boldly against the practice, echoing the teachings of Scripture and the example of Jesus. Their writings, sermons, and letters left no doubt about the Church's unwavering stance. They insisted that, from the moment of conception, every human life deserved protection and respect. For them, to destroy life in the womb was to oppose God's creative work and to deny the inherent dignity bestowed upon every person by their Creator. The Church Fathers called their communities to care for the vulnerable and to uphold the sanctity of life, even when it meant challenging the prevailing attitudes of the surrounding culture. Their steadfast opposition to abortion became a defining feature of Christian moral teaching, shaping the Church's witness for generations to come. In a society where the value of life was often measured by utility or convenience, and where the vulnerable were frequently overlooked or discarded, Christians stood apart through their radical acts of compassion and mercy, setting themselves against the prevailing norms of their time. They reached out to those abandoned or forgotten by society, offering shelter, care, and hope to mothers and children alike, regardless of their background or status. Their compassion was not limited to words, but was lived out in tangible acts of service, often risking their own safety and comfort to help others. They provided for the needs of the vulnerable, affirming the dignity and worth of every human being, no matter how small or powerless. Through their example, Christians offered a powerful and hopeful alternative to the culture of death that surrounded them, showing a new way to live. They demonstrated that true greatness lies not in power or status, but in selfless love, especially for those who cannot defend themselves or speak for their own needs. This legacy of compassion became a light in the darkness, a beacon of hope for all who witnessed it. Their example inspired future generations to continue the work of defending life and extending grace to all, regardless of circumstance or social standing. As the book of Jeremiah reminds us, Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I dedicated you, a prophet to the nations I appointed you. Jeremiah 1:5, Nabre. The Catholic Church has consistently upheld these teachings on the sanctity of life from the earliest days of Christianity to the present day. If you found this insight meaningful, please like and subscribe to Early Church Unveiled for more historical explorations and thoughtful discussions.